Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the monthly Hedera Savannah Meetup, hosted by Creative Coast here out of Savannah, Georgia. We're happy to be hosting Waylon Jepsen from the Attica team, and also now over at one of the staff over at Hedera. So super happy to have him along. So my name's Jeremy Fletcher. I've been a member of Creative Coast for about 2.5 years now. Creative Coast is an entrepreneur and tech support group here in the Savannah, Georgia area. Their mission is to create, code, and collide. And so I've been hanging out with the Creative Coast and the Tech SAV folks here in Savannah for a good while. And very early on, right after essentially the week after Hedera 18, back in October of 2018, the pitch that I gave at Hedera 18, I gave over at Creative Coast. Jen Bonet, the director over at Creative Coast, was kind enough to pull me aside and said, we should talk. Sounds like you're doing some cool stuff. Let's have a chat. And we did, and Creative Coast has been right there supporting us the entire time. So big shout out to Jen and Caitlin over at Creative Coast. They've been helping Ledgerama kind of muddle through all this crazy entrepreneurial stuff that we've been doing. So we are eternally in their debt. And yeah, so my name is Jeremy Fletcher. I am the co-founder of a little software company called Ledgerama. We're working hard to build trust online. Our most recent product is an HBAR wallet called Walla Wallet. We're very proud to have one of the most highly trusted wallets in the HBAR space. We're very community oriented. We like being out there and getting our hands dirty and answering all those support emails directly, talking to folks, whether it's in Telegram or Discord and all those things. So working hard to support the Hedera platform and the Hedera community all the time. And really, really happy to have Waylon Jepsen here. Waylon and I have been chit-chatting and talking shop since, I want to say since probably middle of 2020, I believe is when we started talking. And so I won't spoil too much about it, but basically Waylon's involved with a project called Attica. Attica is a voting platform with the idea of getting secure and transparent voting. And it's just one of those projects that very early on I said, this is cool. This is one of those use cases that Hashgraph is meant for. When I pitched back at the Hedera 18 hackathon, I pitched a health use case for health records. It's kind of one of those big sweeping visions, like society needs this kind of thing. And that's the kind of stuff that Hashgraph does well, whether it's serving enterprises or society at large. Those are the kinds of things that Hashgraph handles. And when I saw the Attica voting platform, I said, that's another one of them. And really pleased to see Waylon progressing with the Attica team and progressing in the DLT space in general. He's over at Hedera Hashgraph now, and I'm going to let him talk about that a little bit, but we're excited to have him. Waylon, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited to chop it up. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so first, let's see, to start it off, if you would, kind of tradition here at the Hedera Savannah Meetups, we just like to get a little bit of knowledge about your background, how you came up in the DLT space, what your background is, and then of course how you came across Hedera Hashgraph.
Yeah, no, really great question. So I actually started my undergraduate degrees in mathematics and philosophy. And how I got into DLT is I had purchased Bitcoin pretty early on, I think in 2015 or something. And I was really interested in the philosophical impacts of distributed applications because they're kind of very democratic by nature. And so I just kind of had to know, I was like, this is such a weird phenomenon. Why is this valuable? Like what makes this valuable? And this eventually led me to building some proof of work mines. And then right towards the end of my completion of my undergraduate degree, I had gotten this job for the Academic Computing and Networking Services. And very interestingly, they had actually received a grant to fund research in how distributed ledgers can benefit the security landscape. And this was the result of a ransomware attack that happened in Denver that this legislation was passed for. And because I had experience building a mining rig and understanding proof of work, and my background in mathematics gave me a cutting edge to understand cryptography, which I was super excited to leverage.
So I have to
They,
ask. So I have to ask
yeah,
about the. So sorry, I have to ask about the mining. Okay,
yeah,
so it's something that I've done a little bit of mining, but not a whole lot. So what kind of rig did you have, and what were you mining, if you don't mind?
yeah. So I actually built it myself. So I didn't buy any miners or anything. I purchased all the components and I purchased, let's see, I used 8 graphics cards. And I think 4 of them were Radeon graphics cards and 4 of them were NVIDIA graphics cards. And I don't remember the exact specs because I think about a year or two ago, I disassembled it and sold the graphics cards. But at the time, I was mining Ethereum.
Okay, gotcha. So a mixture of Radeon and NVIDIA. That's a kind of a unique rig, I think. Um,
Yeah,
so
in retrospect, I actually don't recommend it though, because I did have technical difficulties getting the graphics card drivers to cooperate effectively. So that was
right,
a learning experience because they have different firmware and different capabilities there.
right. Yeah, my mining experience was fairly short lived. I mined some privacy coins for about 6 months until I burned up my graphics card. Then I doubled down and got 2 nice graphics cards and burned those out. And I said, you know what? As much as I've spent on graphics cards, I could have bought a heck of a lot of these privacy coins. So
Yeah,
yeah, so I went ahead and I mean, it was fun, kind of yelling down the mine shaft for a little while, but I got tired of spending money on graphics cards. I think I was just overclocking too much and not really knowing what I was doing, and burned them out. So
yeah, no, it's easy to do. I think there's been actually a really wonderful advancement in the hardware. And I think actually this comes from the amount of funding and research in machine learning, because training machine learning models is very data processing intensive and does a lot of matrix operations, which graphics cards are heavily utilized for. And between this and the proof of work mining, there's been a very large advancement in the technical capabilities of GPUs, which is really great for
that's
lots
cool.
of things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good old crypto industry, bringing along the graphics card industry, with some side benefits there for sure.
Yeah,
All right, cool. So that's kind of fun. We yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, the meetups that used to happen. Of course, they used to happen live, person to person, but they would go in all kinds of different crazy directions. So I still like to bring up some of the old DLT, some of the first generation DLT stuff, and talk a little bit of shop there too. But
yeah.
so okay, so then at some point you're mining Ethereum and getting more and more entrenched in the DLT space, and then all right,
Yeah,
that's where we left off.
yeah. So it was a really wonderful learning experience. I really learned a lot about proof of work, which I think is really valuable knowledge that has taken me far in understanding the value of different consensus algorithms over proof of work, like, of course, the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. But that knowledge inspired the ACNS to hire me to do a cybersecurity internship. And our endeavor was to do R&D with distributed ledgers in the context of security. And while I was there, they funded us to go to a GBA, a Global Blockchain Association Summit, um, kind of down in the Denver area. And this is where me and my coworker, you guys might know him from Attica, Derek, we met, and we met Cooper actually. Wow, full circle now. And Cooper was giving a presentation on Hedera there, and we were really impressed given our prior knowledge. And from there, we were like, you know what? Let's do some R&D stuff with Hedera, this is a really powerful consensus algorithm. Let's like leverage this and go from there.
Once you start to dig in and learn about it's hard to get away from. I mean, going back to 2017, early 2018, and then on in all throughout 2018. I mean, I just kept going back. There was so much activity going on in 2018. Crypto was hot, boy, and and it was one of those like, I caught the video from Mike Maloney, the Hashgraph video where Lehman talks about the shared worlds vision and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I loved what he was talking about. It was kind of like, I was learning a lot of stuff, but I kept going back to it, right? I had to keep checking in. And then of course they had the big release there in March of 2018. And all throughout the year, I said, you know what, and then when I heard about the hackathon, I was like, gosh, I'd really like to go. Gosh, I'd really like to go. And I just couldn't get rid of the idea. I was like, what am I going to do there? Because for those of you out there that don't know, I'm not a developer. I handle all the business stuff for Ledgerama. There's plenty of that, so it keeps me plenty busy. But it was one of those like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to a hackathon and hand out, I'll just look over people's shoulders and hand out coffee. I really had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I didn't care. At some point, some of the guys there was a Discord channel called the Gossip. It was the Gossip Guy channel, and some of the guys in there, and some of them are still floating around over in the Hedera Discord. They're there all the time, and they're like, no, you got to go, you got to get involved. It doesn't, this world is not just software developers. They need people with ideas and people to write presentations and the lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So just jump right in there. They convinced me, so I went, I bought that ticket to Dallas, and it's been a fun ride ever since. So it's like but again, it's once I started to dig in and see how powerful the Hashgraph algorithm was, and see what Lehman's vision was, and how he was building out the team and the governing council, which made a whole heck of a lot of sense in a kind of chaotic, anarchic world of cryptocurrency. It just all kind of made sense. So yeah, you're preaching to the choir, and I'm sure I am too, but please continue.
Yeah, no, it was really great. So anyway, yeah, me and Derek, we learned about Hashgraph, and we decided we were going to build some projects that leverage their consensus algorithm. And so we got approval from the CISO, who is the Chief Information Security Officer. He was like our boss at the Academic Computing and Networking Services. He had put together this cybersecurity endeavor. A really wonderful man, wrote me a great letter of rec for grad school. Really admire him. But anyway, we had written up a bunch of different projects of ideas that we could leverage the security benefits of distributed ledgers with. And we ended up wanting to build a voting application. And there was a couple reasons for this. There's not a ton of transparency in current voting infrastructure, and that's okay. It could actually be quite secure. However, lots of people aren't sure about that. And so what we really wanted to do was make it so transparent that anybody could verify that their vote had been counted, and all of the votes are logged on the immutable ledger. And this was fascinating to me because I've always been a lot more interested in the utility of distributed ledgers, and I still am to this day, than their impacts on financial markets, because utility kind of drives demand, and demand drives financial markets. So I kind of wound up at utility. So utility is where I'm primarily interested in to this day. And I think data integrity is incredibly underrated when it comes to applications of distributed ledgers, especially in cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, there's this thing called the CIA triad, which is the C is confidentiality, the I is integrity, and the A is authorization. And there's some extra I's and A's in newer versions of the CIA triad, but the I, integrity, is data integrity. And data integrity is a fairly big deal, especially in being able to defend against cyber attacks. And so to have immutable data on a distributed ledger is actually a really powerful preventative measure against cyber attacks. And you can do a lot of things to that data, like you can encrypt it. That's how we actually wrote our voting application, is we encrypted people's votes for the duration of the election. And then when the election's over, we decrypted the votes and they were all on logged with the Hedera consensus service. But I think this whole project with Attica and going, so I'm in grad school now doing my master's in computer science, and in a very roundabout way, I'm only doing my master's in computer science because of the rabbit holes that I went down with distributed ledgers. Um, I only started working at ACNS doing cybersecurity because I was mining, and then if it wasn't for there, I wouldn't have found Hedera, and if I didn't find Hedera, I wouldn't have, built Attica with the wonderful people I built Attica with. And, who knows whether or not um, that experience was pivotal of me getting into grad school. I was surprised getting into grad school. I was like, oh, well, I guess I should go now. I didn't expect this.
Yeah, it all changed for me too. I mean, the getting into DLT. I mean, it's one of those, just a fair warning for any folks that out there that haven't really dove down the rabbit hole yet. Beware, your life may change forever. No, and I mean seriously, because a coworker of mine worked for for one of the global telecom providers here in the U.S. And one of my coworkers, that was like March or April of 2017, comes running up to me and grabs me by the shoulders. Dude, we've got to mine cryptocurrency. I said, okay. I had heard of Bitcoin back in like 2012. I had heard of Bitcoin in connection to Silk Road and all the things that were going on with Silk Road. So that was the context in which I had heard about Bitcoin. Basically, it was like PayPal for criminals, was how I had heard about it originally. And then it just kind of sat on the shelf, and every once in a while I'd hear about Bitcoin. But then, once my coworker was like, "Man, this stuff is really popping off. It's hot, it's cool, and it's really interesting technology." Now, I'm a technologist, so I was like, "All right, I've been hearing about the Bitcoin. I've been hearing about, so the deal. And now let me figure out what all this stuff is." And of course, I'm kind of a gold bug too, so anytime somebody talks about mining and digital gold, of course, I'm getting interested. And but yeah, once I started digging in, I said, this is, man, this is not just PayPal for criminals. This is actually really cool technology that's going to change everything. And so from there, it did. It changed. Well, it certainly changed my life. Like I said, I went to Dallas and did that whole thing. And then fast forward, I got laid off back at the tail end of 2019. I got laid off, and one of the biggest layoffs in the history of the company. And I said, you know what? Well, I guess I'm going down the rabbit hole for good. And here we are. So yeah,
Nice.
it definitely can change things for you. So I'm curious. So a couple things that the security organization that you were working for, was that tied to Colorado State in some way?
Yeah, so the organization was, part of Colorado State University. It was the
Okay.
university's basically chief information security officer had received a bunch of grant money from the state of Colorado to
Okay.
put together this cybersecurity unit that I was doing R&D for.
Very cool. Very cool. And then when you were discussing with Derek, when you were kind of going over some of those early use cases, do you remember what some of the other use cases you were interested in were?
Yeah, definitely. We thought a lot about preserving the authenticity of documents like diplomas,
Okay.
which is really funny because now you actually see a couple different companies in the space building NFTs for the integrity of certifications. So it's kind of cool to see that that idea came full around and somebody executed on it, because we thought it was really good. The reason we didn't do it is because there's just a lot of internal politics regarding policies with state universities. And so things with the registrar's office, we were very hesitant to bark up that tree.
Oh, believe me, we started off with HealthBAR, which was a health records use case. That's what got us the second place win there in Dallas in 2018. And we were serious. I mean, we were going to go down that, we were going to go down the path of we wanted to revolutionize health records, right? And talking to a financial advisor very early on, he's like, so all right, so so you had some success, at the hackathon, cool. What are you guys planning on doing? And I said, it's a health records use case, and his eyes just kind of went back in his head, and he goes,
Yeah,
oh, that's a slog. And I was like, what do you mean? And boy, it didn't take us too long to find out, talk about politics. I mean, that goes all the way, back to HIPAA in 2008. And I mean, of course, Capitol Hill and Washington's very involved in the medical space. They spent 20 billion dollars they spent, and it was Cerner that got the deal for the electronic health records deal for the Veterans Administration. My parents used to work for the Veterans Administration, so I kind of, and with the experience I had in HealthBAR, I kind of keep up on that a little bit because I'm interested in what the government's doing with all of our health records. But yeah, talk about the politics. It was one of those, about 6 months in, we ran into some serious issues with the MPI database. So it turns out the MPI database, which is the National Provider Identifier Database, was required of providers to sign up with this database when HIPAA was first passed back in 2008. So all the doctors had to register who they were, their practice, their license number, and their address, and all that kind of stuff. So we were going to leverage that data for some of our services, the MPI database. We were going to pull that in for some of the services that we want to provide with HealthBAR. Well, we got about 3 months into building out this relational database, only to figure out that the information that was in the MPI was basically useless, because the doctors, while they had done they had put on all the information in 2008, by the time we were working on it, 2019 or so, 2019, the information was completely inaccurate, right? The doctors had done it when the law was passed in 2008, put in all their information, but then, anyway, I'm kind of going down this rabbit hole of the health part of the health records use case. But at any rate, just suffice to say that yes, when you get into some of these big sweeping, voting, gosh, I mean, that's no small feat in and of itself. That's fun
yeah,
though. I love the big ideas. So
yeah, and I would say that probably even the very large organizations in this space also deal with policy, and there's a lot of potential regulation. It's a big contentional topic because the technology is pretty disruptive and it's governed in a completely different way. Organizations and governments are used to being able to hold one person or one organization accountable for something, but in decentralized projects and distributed ledgers, they can't do that. And a lot of people like decentralized projects because of that, but it definitely causes a lot of ruffled feathers.
sure.
But we ended up going with voting because of the accessibility of student elections and how they were held to. There was a lot less red tape with student elections than there is with actual real life elections. So we were like, this is a wonderful way to demonstrate this use case.
Right.
Now, we didn't know it at the time, but there's also some red tape there that we've been going through over the years. But we are on track to leverage Attica for the student elections in the spring of 21.
Nice. Okay, so spring of 21's passed, right?
Oh wait, spring, fall of this next semester.
Gotcha. So fall of 21. Got it.
Yeah.
So going back to, so you decided to go with the voting use case.
Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit about what went into? I imagine you had to do a lot of research just to kind of figure out. I mean, I guess depending on what year you started it in, or when you kind of had that aha moment. But what was going on that I mean, if I'm sure Trump was in office, so that's kind of a no-brainer. Maybe it's a no-brainer question, but what was it that started the whole, wow, we really need transparent voting? Because there's systems that were already existing. There must have been
Yeah.
problems that you saw that you said, hey, we need something better.
Yeah, so I think there were two primarily external influences on me and Derek at the time. One, Derek had just gotten back from DEF CON. For the security nerds in the audience, they know what that is, but DEF CON is one of the biggest security conferences.
That's the one that's in Vegas, right?
Yeah, I was really jealous. I still want to go to DEF CON. But in DEF CON, they had a village where they actually put these DRE machines. DRE stands for direct recording electronic. And so this is what a lot of the voting machines are, is these DRE machines. So at DEF CON, a lot of people were tasked at hacking these machines. And at the end, there was like a 12-year-old was able to do it
Oh,
and
wow.
influence the outcome of these DRE machines.
Mm.
So that was one thing that we were like, oh God, is this really the reality? And then while Derek was doing that, I was in a philosophy of law class, and we were learning, I was in a group that was presenting around voting legislation, everything from gerrymandering to one of the big, I think, accepted problems right now is that there was these hanging chads back in the day from the paper ballots. Some of you guys may remember that, some of you may not, but there was some big discussion on discrepancies, and so there was a
Right,
lot
so
of money.
a Chad in you look up Chad in the Urban Dictionary, you're going to see something totally different. So what?
Yeah.
So what's a hanging Chad? For those of us that I'm envisioning some jock dangling from a monkey bar or something.
Basically, these were paper ballots that were hole punched. And so the hanging chads were the ambiguously punched holes, where it
Okay.
wasn't like fully punched or it was unclear. And because of the way that those were processed and counted, there was some discrepancies and debate about how the accurate and the integrity of this voting mechanism. And as a result, there was a big bill that passed a lot of money to fund new voting infrastructure. This was back in like 2002, I believe. Don't quote me.
I think that came out of the Gore and Bush election debacle, didn't it?
That's
if I
exactly
remember
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
I was a young lad of 20.
Yeah, back in the day. And so this is great, except there was requirements about how this money needed to be spent by X certain timelines. And so a lot of the voting infrastructure we have around is the result of some rushed investments in our voting infrastructure.
Congress always knows the best way to spend money on technology.
Yeah. But anyway,
we love our congressmen. They just,
yeah,
you watch them in session sometimes, and it's like, oh man, these guys are really struggling. And I feel for them. They've got a lot on their plate, but it's not always a smooth process.
Yeah, it's really tough. You know, I'm a huge advocate for technical literacy for many, many different reasons, that being one of them, which is one reason why I'm so happy to be doing what I'm doing now and advocating for software developers and engineers. But anyway, these are kind of some of the reasons that we decided to build this voting infrastructure application.
Right.
And Steve Lobos, who was the CISO, still is, approved this and was excited that we were going to build this and leveraging the technology we did. Now we went through, I'm sure what a lot of people go through with DLT projects is, you know, figuring out how to explain this technology and business value to people who have little or no technical literacy. which was, I think, really valuable experience, and it definitely makes you like really, okay, so like this is how this works, but why do the business people care how this works?
Right.
And that's a really valuable perspective to be able to paint, because what you might be excited about as a technologist or a software engineer may not be understood by some business people who are the key decision makers that you need to have them invest their time and energy and sometimes money in you and your ideas.
Right. Yeah. 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 Unfortunately, I think speculation to a large degree is driving a lot of driving a lot of what you see going on out there, and which is kind of a double-edged sword. It's good in that in that there's money pouring in, such that the technologists can leverage it and build really cool things. But then when money wags the dog, so to speak, um, there can be interesting consequences too. But
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
so Attica had so you were looking to make it for the 2021 spring elections there at Colorado State. It sounds like that deadline. Were you able to do it for the spring, or okay? So we're pushing it back to fall. Got it.
Yeah, so that didn't happen. And the reason for that is the organization that holds the student elections is called ASCSU, the Associated Students of CSU.
Okay.
And we had like all of their bosses like sold and ready on the project, but we hadn't done very much conversing with the students themselves. And so as a result, I think at the end of the day, we didn't understand how they were some key decision makers too. We thought that we had all the adults in the room, and we needed some of the students participating in student government as well.
Right.
And once we talked to them, they were all on board and really excited, but the timeline didn't line up for them. And they felt like, oh, this is really cool, but like we're talking about it way too late. So we had to push that back a little bit, dealing with the student piece. So we're in line to execute later down the line, which is still exciting. And there's still a lot of value. And I think that all of the distributed ledger projects have a lot of value in demonstrating use cases. So I'm a big advocate of all of the cool things happening because they, in a sense, are a wonderful demonstration of the applications and utility of distributed ledgers, which is a really powerful thing. I don't know if people realize like how disruptive and big this technology is. And I'm no maximalist, I absolutely love Hedera, and I think we have some really amazing technology and wonderful community of developers, but this technology overall is definitely changing the world and having a really, really big impact. And that's exciting. It's thrilling.
So what was it? What was it about Hashgraph? So you mentioned earlier that that you were mining Ethereum, and I mean I could come up with some guesses, and we might have talked about it a little bit already. But what were some of the qualities of HBAR and the Hashgraph algorithm, and what were the qualities that led you and your team to say, yeah, this is actually the one that we need to be building on, not the other things?
Yeah, great question. So as I said, I've always been really interested in utility, in particular data integrity. And we were dealing very much with a data integrity use case, storing the integrity of votes and voting information. Now, a big problem when dealing with these use cases on Ethereum and Bitcoin is the cost and speed of the cost of the transactions and the speed to finality. And the speed of Hedera that we leveraged with the Hedera consensus service was unparalleled among a bunch of other distributed ledger projects. This is like maybe 1 to 2 years pre like Polygon or Matic, pre DeFi. DeFi wasn't even around here.
Right.
And then also the cost of these transactions was really, really cheap. It's like fractions of pennies to have these transactions on Hedera. And additionally, we didn't have to deploy any smart contracts with their SDKs, which we were really stoked about. Me and Derek had programmed in Solidity a little bit, but we were on this learning curve and we were like, oh man, we hope this doesn't have to become a regular thing. Not that I don't think there's value in learning to program in Solidity. I think that's a super valuable skill. But those are the primary reasons that we drove to use Hedera, and we're really glad we did. And I think it fit perfectly for this kind of data integrity use case. And for many data integrity use cases, I'm really excited about all the projects being built on Hedera, including Ledgeroma.
Nice. Thanks for the plug. Appreciate that. Yeah, we're excited too. There's some really cool stuff coming down the line. I mean, you know, yeah, it's going to be the second half of this year is going to be pretty interesting for us. So we're looking forward to it. So you mentioned HCS. So you're running the HC at the Hedera consensus service in the Attica platform. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So first question, well, yeah, so talk a little bit about that, about the consensus service, why that, you know, what the consensus service is, as you understand it, and how that is the ideal service that the ideal offering of Hedera, because there's a number of them, with cryptocurrency service, file storage, and then of course there's the consensus service, and now the Hedera token service, and I'm missing one. What was the one I'm missing? Is storage, crypto, smart contracts. But yeah, that's why I forgot about it, because they're smart contracts. Anyway, the not so smart contracts. Right. So yeah, could you talk about HCS just a little bit? Because there's not too many publicly because, well, kind of naturally, it's leveraging private networks and getting the public consensus. So I guess it's kind of natural that we don't hear about them as much, but we don't hear about the HCS as much. So I'm interested to hear a little bit about it and why that's the service for you.
Yeah, I think HCS is incredibly valuable for data integrity, and I'm pretty sure our most used service at Hedera. I know AdStacks does a lot of data integrity on HCS that has contributed monumentally to the transaction count. But anyway, okay, so the reason
right, yeah, the Hedera token
HCS,
service gets all the attention, right? Token service is getting all the attention lately because of the NFTs and stuff. But I think you're right. The consensus
cool
service, by and large, takes the lion's share of the transactions on the Hedera network. Pretty sure.
Yeah, and they both definitely have their applications, but we wanted to log unique information to a distributed ledger. And so we also wanted this information to be anonymous. So what we did is we created, in HCS, you create a topic, and then you subscribe to a topic and you submit messages to this topic. And this is how you push information to the Hedera consensus service. Your messages are now have consensus of what they are under your topic. And you can query this on Dragon Glass or Kabuto. And the way we formatted our messages is we had a student ID number, a student name. There was a couple fields, but we put together some important fields into this message. And then we actually encrypted this message and pushed this to the topic. And then we let students, if they wanted to, we gave them the topic memo so they can go and look at the topic and they can go verify. So we encrypted this information and then we gave an ID And when they submitted their vote, we gave them the receipt of their IDs, like, oh, you can look and see that this vote is where it is. And at the end of the election, when we decrypt the information, you can make sure you voted for who you said you voted for. So that was kind of the framework of how we leveraged the Hedera consensus service in Attica. Did you leave, Jeremy?
Yeah, sorry about that. I disappeared for a second. I
was
missed
worried
something
for a
there.
second.
Yeah, no. Sorry about that.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
I missed I missed about 10 seconds. What did I miss? Catch me up.
So basically, I was talking how with the memos that we would craft the messages that we would subscribe to the topic. We had them contain different bits of information. Some of the information we encrypted, and some of the information we maintained verifiable so that people could verify that they had voted on public network explorers. And there's a lot of very interesting legal requirements on voting at the state and legislative jurisdiction that lead to a bunch of philosophical and technological discussions. And this is definitely working for this current use case, but if we were to take this to a state legislator or a county legislator, we would have to jump through some additional technical requirements that these voting systems have to have in place, which I think is overall good. But there's also just a lot more work to do.
Right. Yep. Always plenty of work to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for Attica? Where so you've got the elections coming up in the fall. What other kind of conversations are happening over at the Attica team?
Yeah, good question. So the team is of 4 right now. It has grown since it was just me and Derek. However, I do want to be clear that I've been really busy working with Hedera, and so I haven't been as involved with Attica. And that's not for any particular reason. I love them and support them and am advising them where I can. I know one thing we're working on right now is ranked choice voting, because this is a new type of election infrastructure that a lot of people are interested in at a state and county level. And so this is kind of a sell also at the student government level. The student government's also been really interested in ranked choice voting. So
if I didn't vote for XYZ, I would have voted for them instead. Or I'm interested. So the ranked voting thing, what are they looking to use it for?
they just want to use it as a way to have consensus on the winner of an election. So it's a different structure of how an election is conducted. Now, I don't know all the technical details of it off the top of my head, but some of the ways it works is, the person with the least amount of votes, their votes are then combined with the next person with the least amount of votes. And there's all these different technicalities that there are some political reasons why people prefer ranked choice voting as consensus for democratic elections.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
But it's interesting. Another thing that is a big thing to work on is using an identity service provider. So all the student information is stored in an identity service provider. And so we've been integrating with that so that students can authenticate via their student portal login to our university. So they don't have to authenticate additionally. And identity verification is a whole nother can of worms. And if we weren't doing using an identity service provider for these students, there would be a lot of other things to talk about. We can go down that rabbit hole or not. we don't have to. But there's cool stuff there and other applications there in distributed ledgers as well.
So that would be the AppNets coming into play then when you've got, I'm guessing, right? Is when you've got essentially when you've got multiple networks that need to be able to talk to each other and subscribe to these same, I'm not sure how that works, if they have to subscribe to the same HCS topics. I'm not really clear on how that works, but when you've got an entity like the identity verification, and then what you're doing with the voting, they have to coordinate and collaborate. Is there some, how do those two separate and essentially private networks, how do they talk to one another?
Yeah, so we have actually been able to, receive all of the authorization to integrate with the CSU Student Identity Service Provider, which is great. That's like all the red tape. But now there's technical infrastructure using some infrastructure tools like Shibboleth is the type of identity service provider. And then there's SAML, which is the types of format. And then there's all these libraries of how to integrate with the identity service provider. But the idea is after a student authenticates, they're forwarded to where they can vote. So they don't actually have to do this is all for ease of experience on the students. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but this is what allows students to log into their student portal, where they would check their grades, and then from there navigate to a page where they would vote. And we would be able to query all of their student information and include that in the vote that we submit to the Hedera consensus service.
Okay. And then when you're revealing the information, that's where you get back to, like you were saying, some of the information remains encrypted, and then some of the information is obviously visible because you have to be able to tally the votes.
Yeah, fortunately, there's two really big pieces of red tape here. One you've been really familiar with is HIPAA compliance. Fortunately, we're not dealing with any health records, so we don't have to deal with that too much.
Right.
And the other one is PII of minors, so anybody under the age of 18. So fortunately, we are in kind of this like spot where the information we're dealing with has barely missed both of those windows.
Okay. Right.
So we're doing good on compliance, but that's kind of the bells and whistles of using an identity service provider.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Boy, the compliance in the regulatory environment, that is something that I'm very interested in. It's a pretty vast topic. But we've got a progressive regulator in the SEC now with Gary Gensler, so I have high hopes. Hopefully he had a really fascinating blockchain course at MIT. MIT is really cool in that there's a number of courses that they just provide online, so you can go and it's the full course. It's like the full course, so you can sit and watch an entire semester of a blockchain course at MIT by one of the most, by a world-renowned economist and regulator, and it's pretty cool. So anyway, we have big hopes for the next few years in crypto regulations. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think with distributed ledgers, knowledge really, really is power. But and there's so much accessible knowledge out there. I think what people are learning is that they have to be able to structure it for themselves. At the end of the day, it's kind of like learning how to learn. This is like a big skill that I've really kind of figured out for myself in grad school, is you have to build the right amount of discipline and diligence when learning new things. And it's challenging, but if it were easy, everybody would do it, and the more challenging it is, the more valuable the understanding of it is,
Right.
which is, a nice double-edged sword that can be philosophically played with, and the nature of humans.
Philosophy was my minor, so we'll have to talk shop on that side of the line one of these days.
Yeah.
So we are coming to we're coming up close to the top of the hour. So before we get there, I would like to open it up to any questions there may be out there, technical, political, philosophical, or otherwise.
Before we do that,
yes.
I wanted to just offer, so like right now, I'm really happy and fortunate to be working with Hedera as a software developer advocate. So what that means is it's literally my job to help people learn how to build on Hedera and to use our SDK. And
Right.
it's something I really do enjoy doing too. Like I said, I'm a huge advocate for technical literacy, and I think these skills are really valuable. And there's a lot of empowerment that comes when fostering these skills. So I just wanted to put myself as a resource. Maybe you don't want to ask a question now, but I assume most of you maybe know me on Twitter, or if you don't, you can definitely find me on Twitter from the Hedera Hashgraph page or anywhere else. But I'm accessible via the internet in a number of ways. And if you have questions about using the Hedera SDK and building on Hedera's platform, definitely feel empowered to reach out to me about how to do that if you're stuck.
So one of the questions that we do get a lot about that is just what the background, what kind of background is expected for folks that are either new in computer science or have a varied background but aren't that familiar with the blockchain DLT space. What kinds of skills, what skill set in your mind is going to get people the most prepared for life in the DLT space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a conceptual understanding is really great. But I think when it comes to actually building, some developer experience is good. Recommended, definitely makes things easier. But right now I'm actually working on providing resources of how to use the Hedera SDK from no prior software developer experience.
Wow.
So I'm hoping to put some of these resources out. Um, and I'm working with Lena. Lena's great. Shout out Lena. With to the community, and these start from setting up your development environment if you've never done this, and making a Hello World program, and then go into using the Hedera SDK. And I think particularly if you want to build on Hedera, we have 3 heavily supported languages that I think are all programming is a very valuable skill regardless of DLT, but DLT just makes it more valuable. And so I highly encourage and support and advocate for learning how to program. But our 3 supported SDKs are Java, JavaScript, and Go. And so if you have an understanding in any of these, or if you want to starting an elementary understanding in those languages is a wonderful place to start. And then we do have a unofficial Python SDK I see in the comments. And we're looking at maybe moving that in the documentation. I don't know. I think we have to look at it a little bit closer to make sure it's like really, really good before we official support it. And Jason, Jason absolutely is the official moderator for the .NET SDK. We have a variety of SDKs out there. So we're really doing our best at Hedera to make using Hedera as accessible as possible, regardless of your background. So there's a bunch of different tools and frameworks and languages that are supported. And, I would encourage you, if you're familiar with one, to look into the documentation and find the SDK that works for you and start to leverage your prior knowledge. And if not, I know it can feel really intimidating to start, but if you really want to learn, I'm here rooting for you. And if you have questions, I'll answer them for you. I know programming can be challenging and a hard thing to do.
Right. And and we do have a support group that meets every Friday. It's kind of like Hedera Anonymous. We get together once a week and talk about our trials and tribulations in Hedera Hashgraph in the DLT space. So for folks that are out there, if you're building, our only requirement we call it the HBAR Foundry. The only requirement for the HBAR Foundry is that you be building something on or around Hedera Hashgraph. We have both business folks and techie folks in there every week. It's 11 a.m. Eastern, so that's also a great resource. I believe you've been there once or twice, Waylon, right? On the Friday meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we have a really wonderful community.
we do. We do indeed.
There's a lot of really wonderful, knowledgeable people in our community that are generally really open to helping people if they have questions.
Right. So, so what's your so aside from that, what are some of your recommended? What's the best way for people to dig in if they want to dig in?
The best learning resources.
If they
you
like, if
can't.
they wanted to start off, and they want to, okay, they want to start off and they just want to get a hold of somebody. They want to actually talk to a human being. They don't want to just dig into the documents. What's the best way to find you and find those? And I'm gonna throw out the Hedera Discord, because I think the Hedera Discord is a fabulous resource for anybody that wants to jump into the space. But I'm interested to hear what your ideas are too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with the Hedera Discord, and I'm in there. And it can be intimidating to get involved with a new community, but I would encourage people, if reading the docs and watching YouTube videos is really hard for you, and I understand it is hard. That's why it's valuable. I encourage people. I'm in the Discord. There's a bunch of other people from Hedera in the Discord. Jeremy's in the Discord. There's you can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, but there's a lot of people who are really happy to support you. Jason, who is here as a guest, is a wonderful community member. He maintains the .NET SDK, really knowledgeable, and has done a lot of things for the Hedera community as well. But I would just encourage people, to get over that, maybe a little stage fright and, say hi in the Discord, or, if you want, you can DM me and ask me specific questions. And I think later down the line, I'm hoping to, even host some office hours just twice a week where people can come and ask questions, and I can help them figure out their problems, and we can put our heads together there.
Yeah, office hours are great way to get access, and it feels that way. You don't feel like, that's one of the things that I found. People that reach out to us for support, like as an example with Walla Wallet, a lot of times they're reluctant to reach out. They don't want to take up your time. I mean, some people are happy to take up your time, but others are, apologetic. They were reluctant to reach out. They didn't want to waste your time. They feel like, oh gosh, I'm probably asking a stupid question, those kinds of things. So yeah, so being accessible, and it is hard for some people to reach out. So, but office hours are nice, because then you've got that space. It's like, hey, I'm going to be here one way or the other. If you want to come in and ask a question, I'm going to be there. So
yeah, exactly. Everybody gets imposter syndrome, especially in programming, because there's so much to know. It's really intimidating.
Right. All right. So we are now officially at the top of the hour. I do still want to open it up to questions, but is there anything else that you wanted to cover? Any other ground you wanted to cover before we go ahead and start wrapping it up, and throw it out there for any questions that might be out in the audience?
No, we had totally covered a lot. Unless you have any specific questions, let's see what the audience is curious about.
I've got. I mean, we could do this all night, but I'd rather hand it off to the audience and see if there are any questions out there, and if not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up on this beautiful Monday evening here in August.
Yeah.
So I know Justin's got some questions.
Yeah, I
do. Hey, buddy, good to see you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man, you too. So I'm actually working in voting too. They're not say ready for a distributed ledger yet. But one of the things that I was curious about with Attica is proving that user was them. So how did you handle that?
That's a great question, and taking that to a state and county, that's a lot harder.
Exactly. Yep.
But what we do right now is we do the identity service provider, which is what they have done in the past. So the university says, okay, this is as much identity authentication that we are happy conducting. And so the students, they have an account, that they log into, and that they have a password to, where they get to check all of their personal information about their degree progress, their GPA, their transcripts, how they register for classes, have their course catalogs, their schedule, and the course materials for those classes. And so through that portal, we receive the authentication via the identity service provider. Now, this is a lot more challenging of a problem to solve
Yeah.
when identity authentication becomes a lot more serious. And there are a lot of opportunities for really novel solutions in the DLT space right now. I'm sure you could see where you could leverage some of those opportunities, but it would be, it's an uphill battle there with a lot of legislation and red tape.
Yeah, I think one of the hard things about digitizing an actual vote is how do you get like a driver's license? Like the driver's license is the legacy voting that doesn't really exist here natively. So yeah. It's good to see because I was kind of like, whenever I was thinking about this from a DLT perspective, I was very much in the same boat. Like I've got to be like overthinking this, but no, it is just government red tape somewhat.
Yeah, because it's challenging because you could have an identity on a distributed ledger, and there's a lot of reasons why that would be really great, but there's a massive onboarding problem there. How are you going to onboard everybody, have their own wallet, be able to manage their keys and, manage their identity that's on the distributed ledger? That's a tough one.
Well, essentially, I mean, if when I'm just thinking about it, I mean, you've got to get bodies like the Department of Motor Vehicles has got to be on board in that case, right? I mean, they've got to be fully on board. You've got to be compliant with whatever privacy and security laws that are applicable to them. I don't know what they are. It's not HIPAA, but I'm sure they have a slew of their own regulations. And yeah, so you've got to get them on board. And I mean, I imagine if you got them, I mean, it's technically, of course, it's a huge lift because then you've got to have, I mean, I would think you'd have to have probably multi-sig. So you've got, because if somebody loses their keys, right? If they lose their keys to their identity, they can't lose their identity permanently, right? Somebody's going to have to be able to recover that for them. So, you're going to have a one of two signature kind of deal going on where, where the DMV is able to, is able to sign transactions for you in your stead, or maybe a two of two in the case where you lost it. And it can be either just yours signing transactions or a combination of, no, it wouldn't be yours. At any rate, there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, and anytime you're dealing with government organizations, it can be a lengthy process.
Yeah, it's true. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. I mean, I certainly believe the world would be in a better place if we were able to figure out a solution like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm interested to see if some, if zero knowledge factors into that as well. It looks like there's some stuff that popped into the chat here. So I want to throw these out before, I just want to throw these out just so they don't get ignored. So a question came in: what Hedera service would you recommend to use for continuous distribution of product in a rotational program? I need to be able to certify that a user receives the product.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think I understand what you're saying, but if I'm answering it wrong, feel free to unmute yourself and clarify. So being able to certify that a user receives a product kind of ties back into how you're identifying a user, which is what we were talking about with identity authorization. But say you have authenticated the identity of a user and you sent them a product and you want verification of that product. It also kind of depends on what your product is. If your product is a digital asset, this is an NFT could really easily solve this problem, and your digital assets can be unique. But if your product is not a digital asset, it's a physical asset, then what you would want to do is, I would think the way you would want to try and solve this is with the Hedera consensus service. But the trick is to integrate a system that would verify the receival. And, it depends. It requires how you design the software here, and whether or not you have full jurisdiction of your supply chain management software too. So it's a little bit more complicated than meets the eye, but I do believe that if you are going to design that system and you want to design that system, that you would be able to leverage the Hedera consensus service to verify that data integrity level.
And you would need some kind of layer in some kind of legal layer in the middle, wouldn't you? I mean, at least I'm guessing in most jurisdictions, you're going to have some legal entity that verifies the authenticity of the physical object, that verifies the relationship between the physical object and the digital object, right? And the
Yeah, there's also price oracles to be concerned with here, or oracles in general. So like taking information that's not on a distributed ledger, you need to, and putting it on a distributed ledger, you want to make sure the information you're putting on a distributed ledger is the right information. And that's a challenge too. But there's also, it sounds like maybe for this use case, like Jeremy was saying, maybe there's a big application in terms of service, and you could, protect yourself entirely legally with a good terms of service if you just want to put your terms of service with your organization, the specifications of them receiving a physical asset and the liability that your users assume when working with you.
Just on a technical note, I wonder if the Infinity by Suku videos, webinars might help Abdullah. They're doing, because I know that they're doing physical assets on the Hedera platform. So Infinity by Suku, they've got these tags created, the physical tags that are created by Avery Dennison that they're putting on physical objects, and basically you're able to scan the physical, you're able to scan the tag that's created by Avery Dennison. I'm guessing with your phone, it's got some way of scanning it. So yeah, so okay, cool. Well, thanks for being here, Justin. I'm just going to say bye to Justin because he's got to take off, not necessarily saying bye to everybody yet, but oh, cool. Link to the Suku webinar right there. Thanks, Lena. Nice. All right, so are there any, let's see, oh, soccer in 20 minutes. Got it. I missed that one. All right, my kids are in soccer too, so I understand. All right, so are there any other questions out there before we go ahead and start to wrap this one up? Anybody that's got one, you're welcome to unmute or throw it in the chat. Or of course, you're always welcome to save it and reach out to either Waylon or really anybody in the Hedera team via Discord. Hedera, that's one thing that I will say, the Hedera team has been very accessible. So they're right there with the community, ready to answer questions and ready to help us get along. So I would have never made it had they not been willing to do some hand holding and help us along. So so much appreciation there.
Hey, Jeremy.
Go ahead, Lou.
Oh, hey, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Lou. Hi.
Well, thanks, Jeremy and Waylon for the really appreciate, Jeremy, you're kind of leading us, walk down your, yellow brick road. It's really quite a pleasure hearing it, and you too, Waylon. I have a question about the matter of identity. I'm not sure I followed your approach exactly, but my impression is you're not deploying DLT on the identity task. Is that correct? Or
yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I definitely think DLT and identity is a very valuable exploration. Yeah. And in fact, I think there are some organizations working to solve this on Hedera. I think they're called Earth ID. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but it is, like I said, challenging. And you're absolutely correct. We are using an identity service provider, which is not identity through DLT. This is identity through the student database that CSU has.
Yeah, when I went through something, recently, it was kind of interesting, was I was doing something, then my identity came into question. So they threw me to this company called ID.me. Just the way they were approaching it, I'm guessing they were just trying to round up or, all your online information. They probably, I don't know exactly what's their matrix or, how they decide whether, you're true enough, you're real enough. But I ended up running into a problem because, they asked for, my phone number verify text and all that. So I usually use my Google Voice number. I give them my Google Voice number. They didn't want to deal with it, they're going back to the old way. They wouldn't take anything, unless it's a real network number. And so I gave them my cell phone number. Of course, I never use my cell phone number. So, my cell phone number doesn't exist out there. So they wouldn't accept me. So eventually they put me in this purgatory. Ended up had to go through a video call. And it's all, you're okay. Yeah, you're you. Yeah, and so, yeah, interesting. I thought that could be there could be a DLT solution there. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, identity theft is, a very real problem.
Yeah.
And cybercrime is a very rising problem. And with the increase in cybercrime, the increase of personal identifiable information gets released, the increase in chances of identity theft.
Yeah.
And DLT could very much be a solution here. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I do tax return. That identity theft, it's such a hassle. So it will plague a person for the rest of their life. When they have to file tax return, just incredible. And it's just you can never get away from it. Then you have to go through all these strange handshakes. Take very long time. To clear with IRS.
I mean, really, that's one of the things that's one of the reasons that I'm involved in DLT and got involved to begin with, is things like that. I mean, I think eventually right now, I know that we're still having to lean on the private organizations for identity verification, but ideally we live and interact in a digital world. We need to be able to, in a trustworthy way, without revealing who I am, what my birthday is and where I live, my social security address and all that stuff. I need to be able to, get access to financial services without them having, with just them being able to verify that, yes, I am who I say I am, whether that's through some kind of relationship with other known entities, such that there may be kind of these identity oracles I could envision, so entities that are aware of who you are, and have your personal information in some way. Of course, then you're getting into this, you're back into the centralized game, but maybe some kind of decentralized autonomous organization or something that is, that is responsible for maintaining encrypted identity information. I don't know. I don't know the solutions, but it's definitely one of the ones that I'm most interested in, because I think being able to maintain the privacy of our transactions and being able, but we want to maintain our privacy and still be able to transact in a trustworthy manner. So it's a big one. Well, there's a lot of work to do, but I think we'll get there. It's just going to take some time. It's going to take some more Waylon Jepsens and some more Lou Fangs and Justin Atwells out there to make it happen.
Go ahead,
Lou.
Yeah, I have, I don't know, this is a too far field. I have a sideway question for Waylon. So now you're in the educational environment. So I'm asking sort of a, technology and education question. So, you had the background in math and philosophy. I imagine, you already built up a foundation in computer science, but now you are in computer science. So, just what your reflection on the, on the educational approach. You said, you by going into a rabbit hole, you ended up on the, cutting edge of computation, technology in some way. And then, you come back to this sort of formal education, had to deal with data structures, algorithm, hardware, software, architecture, and all that. Well, what's your perspective? Are they helping you, in school, these formal education, or are they, kind of lagging behind in compared to the, the application area?
That's a really good question. I've definitely done a lot of independent learning myself, which required a lot of discipline and consistency and determination. Except with my acceptance into the master's program, they had me take some additional courses just because I didn't have background in computer science. And this got me up to speed fairly quickly. Now, there is criticism in academia, and this is true across the board. This is a primary criticism of academia, is that a lot of things taught are very theoretical. And the theoretical knowledge is, of course, valuable, but some professors don't provide very much hands-on experience. And now I've had incredible professors that, they make you do assignments where you have to write a program to manage memory allocation or process communication. And those courses are the more challenging ones, but they're definitely the more valuable, because you actually, get to write the code that does that. And so I think some of the best ways you can learn is with the hands-on experience. However, I'm also a little biased now because part of grad school is publishing papers, and papers can be pretty theoretical. Usually they require some hands-on experiment before you can publish your research findings. But in academia, there's a big emphasis of like how valuable publishing papers in academic journals is. And so of course I'm all on that train, and I think it's really valuable because it's what I'm working on and doing right now. But that criticism of academia is very theoretical. I think the primary advantages of traditional education when it comes to a very technical field is providing you with the structure to learn, because the biggest challenge if you want to do it yourself, which you can, and there are resources for, is that you have to have an immaculate amount of tenacity and discipline because it's hard. And so if you have that, then you don't need to go to university, to cultivate those skills. But it will be very challenging to cultivate those skills, but your skills will also be really valuable. It's this dichotomy of valuable skills are very challenging to cultivate.
Yeah, I had a music teacher for a long time that, that always, would say that, the geniuses and the real talented ones probably aren't here, because they're already off in the real world, solving problems and working furiously. So, so in a way, it was like, basically what he was saying was, yeah, all you ones that have to go to universities are the ones that you weren't quite there. You didn't make it in the genius column. No, I'm just kidding. It's the utility of university, I think, at least for me, was it is what you make of it. If you're, and I think that's, that personality type of being able to dig in, being able to be tenacious and stick with it. It's like, yeah, you've got to have those. Otherwise, none of it's really going to help you very much. But
yeah, like anybody can do anything for a day, but doing something for like 100 days or a couple years consistently is how you really get good at something. But it's a lot harder to do
right.
that than it is to do something for a day.
Yeah, my first declared major was civil engineering, and I was very I was enamored with the idea. The Renaissance painters were all were all civil engineers in a way, or many of them were, right? The Leonardos and the Michelangelos, so to speak. So I had this kind of romantic idea of civil engineering, and then it didn't take but a semester and a half of physics, and I went, wow, this is really hard. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this day in and day out. So at any rate, yeah, you're right. Being able to take interest in one thing, in something, and being able to do it day in and day out are definitely a little separate. So, all right. So with that, unless there are any other questions, I'm happy to take any other questions if they're out there. And otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap it up. So this has been the monthly Hedera Hashgraph Savannah, Georgia meetup. We meet every first Monday, and we meet at 6 p.m. Eastern. So if you enjoyed the conversation and the topic that we went over today, please come and see us the first Monday of September. We will be back. Last month we had we had a retired asset manager in to talk about markets and trading and surviving and even thriving in down markets. So that was a hot one. We've got, we have a whole slew of guests come in. So if you enjoyed this session, I sure hope you come back and see us next Monday. Again, wanted to give a shout out to Creative Coast, both Jen Bonet and Caitlin Lance over at Creative Coast here in Savannah, Georgia. They've been supporting myself and our company Ledgerama since the inception of the company. So many thanks to the folks over at Creative Coast. They're the ones that make this possible every month. So many thanks to them. Many thanks to Hedera Hashgraph. I saw Lena pop. It looks like Lena may have taken off, but big shout out to Bug Bites and all the folks that we've got that are the regular Hedera folks, the H barbarians out there. So big thanks to you guys. And of course, big thanks to Waylon Jepsen and the Attica team for letting him come and talk with us. And a big thanks to all the community members. You guys, you saw us on Discord, you saw us in Telegram, you saw the messages on Twitter or wherever it was, and you came to support the community. And we really appreciate it. This is it's not as fun when there's nobody here. So when folks show up, we certainly appreciate it. There has been a few times where it was just me and the crickets. So we appreciate everybody showing up to show your support.